Tuesday?
I'll be working it.
Me too. I didn't know if you didn't have more traveling with your daughter.
No. We did Arizona.
Yeah.
And then
All right.
Virginia the next.
Yeah. Get some miles on. You drove to Virginia, right?
Yes, we did. That, you know, because Chris does all the driving anyway, so that wasn't bad.
It's really not
It's
that
fine,
far.
I mean, it's-
Yeah, exactly.
Took the Tahoe, so I had the back row.
Passed out 5 minutes in.
Just trying to change it up today.
What's that?
Says that a new sports code. I said, no, I just changed it up. It was there.
Haven't seen that one in a while.
Said that'll go with the tie I picked out for today. So I was working backwards in my choices of apparel. Plus, I'm glad everything matched because when I walked out the door, I had about one eye open. So I fell asleep in the chair in the kitchen. Patty had to wake me up.
What? The chair? I thought
The
chair.
So that
The
so-
Christmas
so
chair?
that saga continued because the chair showed up. Right? The chair showed up. And then I was directed to have the chair put in the big living room with the 2 large windows because that's where all the sun is. So apparently, my chair was then moved into a room that I don't go into. So now I'm still
So it's no longer your chair.
trying to gather space. I had to get like very sick in order to be able to use my own chair. I'm like, be in it all day
Oh,
waiting
okay.
until people got home.
So this is some big strategic plan you got going
Yeah,
here.
so the chair does arrive.
So he wasn't really sick, he was
It's
just
all
hanging out in
right.
the chair.
It's all part of the game.
I have 6:30, if we could please call our meeting to order. And if I could, please ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could please have a motion to approve our meeting minutes of regular meeting, March 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments regarding the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
We do not have any updates to this evening's agenda. Commentary from you, Superintendent Burke?
I have many things I could say, but I'll be fairly brief in that with the warmer weather, it just rises or raises everybody's mood. And we have had over this last week some phenomenal activities here at school. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to get to some of those, but last week alone we had a number of activities, both musical and athletic activities, that were just phenomenal. And just to see, the mood brightening because of the spring-like weather and the kids being active outside and in musical, in the musical events. It's just been fabulous. And we're going to be heading away here, some of us anyway, for spring break. And when we come back, just more opportunities for our kids to shine. And I just want to say thank you to the board and to those folks that are sitting out here that provide those opportunities for our kids. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And that's really what I felt like I needed to say tonight too.
And I would say that's pretty inspirational actually, because March can be a long month. So to see people brighten and finding things that they want to engage in and be excited about, I think that's phenomenal. So congratulations to the district. I believe this evening we're going to have a strategic plan committee update.
Yes, we have, I'll call it a skeleton crew. We are going to provide information about the process or progress that we've made as part of our strategic plan committees. As you know, our strategic plan was developed in a district-wide effort 3 years ago. And our 3 standing committees that came about as a result of that: community engagement, student engagement, and our social emotional learning committees have continued to work. And what we tried to do at least annually, if not more often than that, is give you folks an update on where we've gone and where we will continue to go with those committees. So tonight we thought we would give you an update. And I use the term skeleton crew because with this presentation, we want to run through all of those, but if you look at our facilitators of each of the groups, community engagement, Josh Pinn and myself, student engagement, Jeff Ebner and Ashley Gilbert, both of those folks are out tonight because of family issues. So we have this information there for you, and we'll be happy to share that with you. And then I want them to come back though at a later time and dive deeper into those types of things that they've been doing, because that committee, more so than probably the other two, we have struggled to get out of the gate with some of those things that were outlined in that strategic plan, but they started to make some movement this year. And then lastly, Chris Moore and Doug Pascarella will share with you the information about our social emotional. So Josh, if you want to come up, why don't we get this thing, we can get it started. So Josh, I will be first to tell you that he's done an outstanding job of helping to facilitate this. He does the majority of the work, if I'm honest, and he's done a wonderful job in doing that. Really spearheading the efforts as it relates to community engagement. These are the strategies that were present in the development of our strategic plan. So in that strategic plan, we wanted to increase opportunities for parental involvement and make a welcoming environment for our buildings. Now, that flies in the face, at least it seems to, when we hit COVID. And so we had to take somewhat of a back seat in that regard when we were barely allowing staff in the building, not to mention the community. But we're again, those are, now that we're back, beginning to make a focus there. Develop a district communication plan and routinely soliciting feedback from stakeholders. So those were our strategies as part of the strategic plan for the Community Engagement Committee. Josh, you want to start hitting some of these?
Sure. Well, and as Tom indicated, I mean, when COVID hit in early 2020, we were about 3 meetings in. To prepare for this meeting, I was looking at how many meetings we actually held, and I saw a meeting scheduled for March 12th, 2020. It was like our 3rd meeting, and I sent an email to the group saying, just so you know, because of circumstances beyond our control, we aren't going to be able to have this meeting. We're excited to see it April 22nd, 2020. So we know how it ended up turning out. So unfortunately, that first goal, the making ourselves more approachable, that really was put on hold. However, COVID did not stop us, and actually it lit a fire under us for a lot of these initiatives, because what we were finding is Mr. Turk had an opportunity to reach out to the community every so often, right? In a way that was new and that we hadn't really necessarily prepared for. We ended up being the hub really for the community when it came to understanding where we were going with this reaction to COVID. So that was one of the first things we did as a group during COVID. We met virtually and we said, we need a better way to communicate with parents. We need it to not only come from the superintendent, but from the buildings, from the teachers. We need a really unified way. When we were doing our very first fact finding while developing the plan, that's something that came up over and over, was consistency and regularity. And that's where Parent Square comes in. I know a lot of you guys are parents and you get these messages, you're getting them quite often. I think we've done a really good job as a district to kind of funnel all communications through there. We've been working very hard recently on ensuring that all athletic teams are communicating through there, so that if you're a parent and you have a kid in the elementary school, you have 2 kids in sports in the junior high, and you have a kid who's doing play in the high school, all of those communications to try to funnel all of that different time and date and all that stuff are all coming through one app, one communication platform. That was a big one. It was a big lift for our staff. It was a lot of work to get them up to speed and comfortable with the platform. But I think once they saw some of those strengths, they really jumped on it. The other thing that we jumped into is a new website. Our old website just was starting to kind of show its age and needed to be revamped. And it also didn't allow us to shift focus quickly. So if we needed to really present something in a high level to get eyes on it, it just wasn't possible. We had to email a guy up in Syracuse, and if he was on vacation, then it was a week before we could get this urgent thing out. So we have a new platform now that we can, our PR people are more than able to update, but we are internally and locally too. And actually, we were able to marry Parent Square and the website. So when Superintendent Turk has an important message that he sends out via Parent Square, he can simply check a box. Doesn't wake me up at 5:30 in the morning to post it on the website. It's a little selfish on my part, but it's also, what if I'm not there? What if I'm on vacation and I don't have self-service or whatever? That communication can go out consistently, can be done from one central communication point. Those two were really a big lift for both the committee to kind of identify and look at the different options, but then also the implementation on the district end takes time. And I think that's one of the things you're going to find with a lot of these groups is the committees are going to be working kind of in fits and starts. We have an initiative, we work really hard to do it, and then the folks in the district have to actually do it. And while it may seem like we're slow, it really is in fits and starts. So the committee identifies work that's good, and then the district does the work. And then we identify those next steps, and then we do the work. And you'll find in a couple slides from here that that's exactly where we are, right in those phases where we're in the process of actually putting pencil to paper and getting some of that work done. And then if you notice that the third strategic intent or strategy was to solicit feedback consistently from the community. And that's one of the things that we've been working hard on too. You can see we have a guardian involvement survey. We kind of, after rolling out some of these things, asked people's opinions. And we've actually surveyed quite a bit on different ways to communicate. Additionally, one of the things that people have always said is half the group says, or half of the stakeholders say, man, I wish people would be more involved. I wish we could get more people involved. And then so that was something we brought up a lot in our group. And it turns out a lot of people, when we asked them, said, we'd love to be involved. We don't know how to. We don't know the opportunities to get involved. So what we did is internally, we took a lot of time to kind of identify and articulate every single opportunity for involvement. And we created a single platform, a single web page, an area that people can go to that have the people who are responsible, the consistency or how often this group meets, the charge of the group, and the different levels of involvement that are available. And we've been pushing that, and it's actually the signature of Mr. Turk's emails. Every time he sends a Parent Square, there's a thing that says how to get involved. And we're going to continue to try to encourage that to be infused into more and more communications, because it's not that we don't have a community that wants to get involved. You know, it's one of those things where if we, as a communication committee, we say often, you know, it's not good enough to just say, well, I communicated it to you. If you don't pick it up, then it's on you. That's not communicating. That's only one-sided communication, right? So it's our goal to make that two-sided, and that's where the Get Involved webpage.
And the challenge with that too is to make sure that that stays current. And so that'll be an ongoing thing, because now that people are starting to see it, they're saying, you know, I think this group would be perfect to be added to that. So we want to obviously keep doing that as we move along. So here's some things that our group continues to look at, we'll continue to work on as we move forward. These are things that we have had conversations with and currently are. That community communication survey, that is a two-sided document that will be sent to every household in our district. That'll be going out early May, and that will give us what we think will make it much easier for us to develop an entire communications plan. That'll give us some much needed information to be able to do that. So that's going to be going out here in the next few weeks. We want to stagger, because again, we just sent out a survey as part of the student engagement work. We are going to be sending out information about the budget. We don't want to inundate people, but we want to do it in a thoughtful way. One of the things too, it's all about ease of interacting with us. I've been seemingly having a lot of doctor's appointments lately, and I'm giving my wife feedback, because typically it's where she works. And it's amazing when you take a look at something from the customer perspective, how that perspective changes. And that's what we're trying to do here in Homer too. So if I'm a parent and I have a child in multiple buildings and in athletics or in the music area, we have different calendars that people have to go look at to try to identify what's going on. And so we have identified the calendars, the various ones that we have, and our job is to find a way to marry all of those together so that when you go to the district webpage, you can click on the date, and then there are live links that take you to the various things that you might be looking for. We have a lot of things going on here in Homer, which is awesome. So it's not feasible to put it in one spot, right, all in one area, but to link it there, athletic practice link, athletic game link, you know, musical link. Those things will help people better navigate all those great things that we have going on. And then we have started to create a community communication group, and that's part of Parent Square. We've populated it, and I think I've mentioned it here too. We've populated it with some folks. We had some, about 14 or 15 people, kind of find it by accident. But then we populated with Homer Business Association folks and Rotary Club members. And so we have about, what's the number, Josh? Around
70 or 80.
Yeah, about 70 or 80 folks now that whenever I send out any information about whether it's COVID related or just upcoming events, I always include that group in there. So these are folks that may or may not have, and quite honestly, most of them don't have a connection currently to the school district. We want to continue to grow that. And that's, again, that survey that we're sending out here in the next couple of weeks, that's going to ask if they want to be in that group, and we'll add all them. So we're hoping as we move on that we'll get better at identifying who would like to be in there, but even getting more specific with that group. So as an example, an alumni group that we could create as part of that community group. So we could target them with specific information that they tell us that they want to hear about, or groups of any shape or form. So we think it's got a real possibility to help us out, do a better job, not just with those, you know, more widespread communications like budget and that kind of, and construction projects, but we can do a better job on a regular basis of communicating.
No, and I'm of all of these, I think the bottom one is really where we're gonna really start to see some of the fruit of our labor, some of this work. I mean, right now, we have, unless we're sending a budget notification, we don't have a way to reach interested parties. I mean, we can go to WXHC, we can put something in the Homer News, but you're still only kind of catching people here and there. This is a way that folks who don't have a direct affiliation, they don't have a kid that goes here, will be able to continue to be engaged with us in a way that we haven't been able to do before. Our Facebook, again, is kind of a blast. This is going to allow us to have a little bit more of that dialogue. And I think it's really has an opportunity to make people feel even closer to us. So I'm excited to see how this group grows.
Questions for Josh or I about the community engagement portion of our work?
So I think the community communication group, I have that same kind of excitement about it, Josh. You know, even thinking about local businesses knowing when some of our events are occurring, so that they can maybe market to, hey, the play is going on, that typically draws in grandparents and our local restaurant, right? Or our professional development days may lend themselves more to people hitting the coffee shop. I mean, just for people to have that awareness of what's going on in district and how to support what's going on. Also, we'll let them know about traffic flows, right? Oh, it's a big wrestling tournament. I think that's kind of a neat.
Yeah, and I think we can also really do a great job of celebrating some of our successes there too, right? So, you know, I would hope that we have a bunch of realtors who would be subscribing to that, right? So
Right.
they would have plenty of glossies that would be able to share, or with, you know, places of worship to be able to say, look at how our, our congregation is doing and some of the successes of some of the kids that go to our church. And there's a lot of neat opportunities here
Yeah, I like it.
that we haven't reached yet.
So as I mentioned, our next group is student engagement, and currently the facilitators of that group are Jeff Ebner and Ashley Gilbert, and both of them are out tonight. So this part of the presentation follows the same format. The strategies that was part of the capital project And again, I'll have them come back and give you more detail later, but I just wanted to share the information is in your board doc at this point. The progress highlights, if you look at those, the majority of those are work that's been done so far this year. We did have grade level meetings, obviously, and collaboration meetings as part of the daily schedule at the elementary and intermediate school in the past. One of the things I think you saw though at one of the last meetings when we held it at the elementary school, the focus of those meetings really has been outstanding and really actionable work that's being done in those. And that's the, as a result of this work of this group and the folks in the building. We talked about the curriculum audit that we conducted earlier this year, then those action steps that are part of that for us to really make some movement in that area. And I was at the last meeting of the student engagement group just a week or so ago, and heard from some students who took and was part of the focus group activity that tried to get a feel for what's the student reality here in our district when they're in our buildings. How welcome and supported do they feel? How challenged do they feel? And so we spent some time, and Keith was there if Keith wanted to add anything, and had at least the start of an opportunity to sit and talk about some of those findings and to try to make some generalizations or some action steps associated with those. But I'm not going to do it as good a justice as they would, and so I want them to come back and talk more. But pleased with some of the work that's being done with this group this year, with Jeff and Ashley leading the charge. Questions about this that I might be able to answer right now before we move to? And these are some of the actually, that's a quite lengthy list, but student engagement really is what we're all about, trying to make sure that kids have a good experience here. Again, I'll let you go through those and then bring those folks back and answer some of your questions next time. So with that said, let's go to Mr. Moore and Mr. Pascarella, the co-facilitators of our social emotional health group.
All right, everybody, how we doing tonight? We talked a little bit about this last year as well and kind of gave you that update. As you can see, there were a number of different things that were identified in this area for the district when the strategic planning was done. And little did we know, those were even going to only be exacerbated by COVID and everything that has happened since the actual development of this plan. But there's quite a lengthy list of those things that we are working our way through, and we're just going to give you some updates as to where we are, or where we have been, and some of the things that we're doing right now.
And as you move to that next one and they kind of glance through that, the thing that I want to point out to you, as Josh spoke about political involvement, this was a committee that had 60 plus, maybe even 70 to 73 people.
67.
Right, when we started. So, but what happened for us, a little bit different than what happened for the other groups, is a lot of our work actually then came back into the buildings. So Chris will go over some of those things and we'll outline some of those things, but there was a large community effort to develop really, which Chris, if you would slide to the next slide, talking about what we define social emotional wellness. And the reason why it's passionate to me right now is we have a group in our building that's looking at our social emotional curriculum. What are we going to use to teach our students about social emotional learning? And today, I really took the charge about showing them to say, hey, we're not, because they were looking to define a mission in our building and a vision. And I said, slow down, it's great thinking, but it's been done for you, because the definitions are already there. So we'll share that with you at some point, because I think that's another piece that we can get to them. But understanding how we define social emotional well-being or wellness, and it's important to understand that definition of that there wasn't taken lightly. When you try to put a group of people together, 63 people, and looking at language matters. And I think that's really important that we actually understand that it's been defined. And a big thing that in this group is the way that we are going to then work through our buildings to define that language and carry that on from pre-K all the way to that senior, that we're supporting that kid all the way through that continuum.
Yeah, so a few different things have happened. One, before we felt like we could move on that, we had to do exactly that. If we're going to say we want to work on social emotional wellness first, what does homework see that as? You have to let me know if you can't hear me. Just jerk off and let me know that I'm kind of a quiet talker. So if you guys have trouble, just let me know, please. As we went through, we first tried to identify a few different things. We wanted to figure out, one, what is that social emotional wellness? And then two, We've heard us say as a district in the past that we often have a lot of things going on within the district, and maybe not all of them are working in the same direction, or realize that there may be some overlap in the things that they do. So we also spent time identifying all those groups that existed at the district level as well as the building levels that were working in some of these areas. So that as we started to identify some of this work, we knew where it could happen, but could also try to prioritize and better utilize the time. Because as you know, many people are often a part of some of the same groups. So rather than doing things in multiple places, we want to identify what's the best place to do it and how and where. So we reviewed that, and so now we have a much better understanding of what groups we have access to that can help with this work. We also, last year, spent a good chunk of time researching and identifying a social emotional progress monitoring and screening tool. We purchased the BIMIS for this school year. We have now purchased that. We also worked to accompany that with SEL curriculum, or social emotional learning curriculum. Last year, this is something new. This is not an update of curriculum. This is an all-new curriculum identification for grades pre-K through 12, because it's not something that we've ever had. We've had character education, we've had other things that we've done that work in this vein, but we've not had a unified or consistent SEL curriculum at any one grade level, let alone building, or let alone the district. So we took this to our instructional leadership committee, where we worked with groups of teachers. Obviously, that committee is also made up of outside membership, parents, et cetera, and said, as we are identifying this, what are important steps that you would see us making sure that we do to ensure that once we are moving forward, we've really checked all the appropriate boxes, involved all the right people, and taken the appropriate precautions and researches. So we outlined those steps with the instructional leadership committee last year, and as a result of that, each building then identified groups within their own building levels that were going to be doing this work in those areas. When we started doing a lot of this, it was also what became evident is it's not one of those things that is or can be done and utilized in an isolated way. It impacts other areas. Social emotional learning curriculum is one. Another is being prepared for what that information is that we could get for or from those screeners. Some of which includes things which may identify students who we are concerned for self-harm or other things of that nature. And so we have to make sure that we also have appropriate plans so that when we have that information, our district is prepared to address that and facilitate making sure students our staff are getting the appropriate help in a timely fashion. So in addition to outlining an SEL curriculum plan and identifying the screener, we also revisited as a district our suicide prevention manual and updated all of the documents that are within that to try to make those more accessible and usable for our purposes. Where that has brought us is now this year. So you see next steps, but a lot of this is also stuff that we are currently doing. So part of the BIMIS, we got there, and one of the things that we heard loud and clear from staff and from those folks that were already utilizing this in neighboring districts was you really truly need to roll this in a thoughtful way, and you need to involve not just your own staff, but outside groups to make sure that you can appropriately address this. So we looked at our suicide prevention plan. We've also started partnering with OCM BOCES, and as well as Speak Up Portland and local neighboring groups within our county levels to look at, in addition to having our manuals, what additional training and information can we provide to staff and to families. So we've now worked with those groups to identify multiple trainings that can now be implemented within our district so that staff can build a better awareness and better support our kids throughout the year as well as know how to where to go with some of this information as it arises.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that, it's this, I would say, in no disrespect to the other two that we have in front of you, is that there's so much deeper work that's involved that it just can't be rolled out with a quick edit or a change. And it has to be really thoughtful. But along that lines, if we want to get that BIMAS, one of the things to understand, that's a 7-day snapshot of where your child was there in those 7 days. Not before and not trying to predict. It's in those 7 days, doing this screener, is trying to determine where that child is. And one of the flags in that one, just so you understand, is question 24? 14. 14? Okay, I'm going to beat you on that. It's 24. But the idea is that that question flags for a junior high and high school student more so that they actually need additional support, that they would be interviewed by a counselor and additional support. So that's why it's important that we don't roll that out and that screener on the same day for all kids. So, right, if we just jumped into this whole, hey, we want to go, but not understand the ramifications of asking those questions because we're seeking the question and understanding how we support our kids, but now then we didn't have enough people on staff to be able to meet. So strategically making that thoughtful plan on how we're going to roll that out and interview our students, especially the ones that were flagging a question that really calls for a further follow-up meeting. So I think that's really important because it's extensive.
And for all those same reasons, it also includes how we're rolling this out to families.
Yeah.
You know, this is not information that we want to take lightly in terms of how you distribute that, but it's something that has to go out in an appropriate fashion.
I'm going to, yes, because I'm going to jump the bullet too, Chris, and I'm going to just talk about that because the SEL crosswalk is really essential. And I see two teachers here right now, you know, when you think about ELA and looking at the New York State standards, and then paring those down and looking at what essentials a kid needs to know in pre-K to K to 1 to 2 to 3 and all the way up. It's the same work we're going to have to do right now with SEL, looking at New York State standards, and then using CASEL, because CASEL has built a framework that actually is kind of that one group that we can say, okay, the CASEL has standards. So now we have to look at our New York State standards, we're going to take a crosswalk with our CASEL standards, and that's the current work that we're having our groups do right now to identify, because that's a heavy lift. Because we know we can't hit all the standards, because New York State gives us an absurd amount of standards, but we have to then look at prioritizing in our district, what are those standards that our kids, that we believe are essential for our kids to be hit. And by the way, that should come from looking at our mission, understanding our culture and our community, and looking through that thoughtfully with our educators, looking at that, really teasing that out. And then so there's a horizontal piece, and then there's there's a vertical, and there's that horizontal piece. So the vertical right within that grade level, and then of course the horizontal is looking pre-K all the way to 12, so that we make sure that you guys have we never taught them this before they got to us. We want to make sure we're filling those gaps before they get there. So I think that's a heavy lift, but that's a lift that's happening right now. And for us in our building, I'll just speak for us, and the principals that are doing their work. But our goal is to figure that out before we walk out the door in June. That we have identified that crosswalk and that's completed. And then the next steps are teasing out curriculum and those types of things and how we're going to support the needs of kids in an MTS, MTS is the multi-tier structural support. Yeah, and that replaces, by the way, for those in the past, RTI.
One of the things, Chris, I want to jump in, and Chris was able to make a contact with a woman that has essentially done this work and is about 5 years in front of us. And that's where it says district partnering with a consultant. She will help us. She's wonderful. We've had a number of meetings now with her and done some training with her. What she has done is helped us to see some of the potential pitfalls, some of the mistakes they made, and to help us avoid those mistakes. And so that's going to be invaluable for us and really help us to put it together more quickly than we would if we were doing it like they did, where they gradually worked on this implementation over a 5-year period.
Yeah, and so she has already come in. We had done some kind of district level meetings, so we just recently completed an additional administrative training for things that are not only how to just administrate, but how this is going to be communicated to staff, things you need to be aware of, how you have to structure your buildings, how you're going to present this information to parents, helping us with templates for how to get all these things out. She's also, we have trainings now set up for our support staff. A big piece of this is making sure that our social workers, our psychologists, our school counselors are on board, trained, and prepared, again, as a part of how we're going to address these things as they come up. So we have a rollout plan that we had developed and are continuing to develop with her. And then you heard Ms. Spessarella talking about our curriculum work right now. So every building has their identified team that is doing that. Each building has now done a curricular crosswalk to see what things based on the standards in the CASEL framework currently exist within the buildings, where those things currently exist within the buildings. One of the things that we recognize is, there are not additional periods in the day now. So one of the challenges with introducing a completely new topic is also finding out where does this fit within our instructional day, who's going to deliver that, what are those resources for those folks who are going to, and how do we prioritize what they're doing in each of those areas. So each building has now worked through, we did some of this work on the staff development day again, those curricular and crosswalks and framework reviews. And so in conjunction with that, they are now in research phase where we have both horizontal and vertical documents to help us make sure that the curriculum that we're identifying is going to make sense across the district. I don't know that we end up with here's the curriculum that it's going to be for pre-K through 12, and that may not be the case, but what does matter in that is if it's not, those curriculum need to work together. The things that we teach and the skills that were the foundations that we're going to lay pre-K through 2 need to translate when they arrive in the intermediate school so that those skills that we're developing can continue to grow and not have to be reset. So we are making sure that the work we're doing makes sense across grade levels, but also across buildings.
Questions for Chris or Doug?
So I'm guessing that as buildings have begun their work, there may not be representatives from other buildings sitting in while that work is being done, and
So
that
I
maybe,
can't stop you right there. Lisa Myers, who we've hired, right, as a community, as a social worker,
Yep.
has been sitting in our meetings and also sitting with Steph's meetings.
excellent.
So we're really using her to connect that bridge, but then there's gonna be purposeful connection to say, hang on, we still gotta do what we're doing in our building to figure out what we are doing. And then after we do that, we then have to go, and I talked about this with our team today, and I gotta get to Steph, is that next alignment to say, hang on, here's where we are. And then as we look at the SEL, when we're looking at the standards, we said we eliminated this or did that, but what did it do to now third
Right,
grade?
right.
Our big concern in second grade is making sure second grade is ready for third based on what they're gonna be doing. Now, Steph and I haven't talked extensively yet, but the idea is can we try to align maybe pre-K through 5 with similar kind of like curriculum and language, because it's gonna be real important for that group. And then the hard part that Steph is gonna have, right, is that 5 to 6 to marry over to that way, and then Kara 8 to 9. Well, we're doing those, so yes, it's an honor thing, but there are some people that are sitting. And we in this last meeting, you had Lori Schmidt, Jacqueline Davis, we've had some sites sitting in for that training with Baldwinsville to say, hey, this is what you need to be aware of before you go out with a rollout.
And
So, yes, great question.
There's actually also, I would say, 2 other groups that are in our planning as a part of it as we start to do some of this work. Students, because as we start to look at curriculum, I think it's important to involve them in terms of examining what those things are and what it's going to look like. It does matter. If you've looked at some of the interventions, some things may be standardized for pre-K through 12, but how they present may not be super appealing to a 12-year-old if they're in a similar format to an 8-year-old. And some of the things are programmed that way. So some, it is going to be important that they have some say in this. Does not seem like something realistic that somebody of my age would participate in. It's going to buy into things there. So you got to get feedback there. And then most of these things also have components of how information for families. So then how do we start to share this with families, some of the ones as we narrow these things down. Here's some of the family component information materials that can go to you guys to support the work that's happening in the schools and your homes. So I think there really are multiple groups. We've got to get those building level conversations, then as well as students and parents.
And I'd like to add these last 2 things. I think listening to your voices, whether it's a retreat or your voices here at the meetings as board members, you always talking about community involvement, thinking about what that looks like, how do we get all stakeholders involved. That's always in the back of our minds, because the last bullet here talks about that, is that just because we're doing this work in our buildings doesn't mean that's the final silo, because we are going to need outside agencies to support the work of us working with kids when it comes to social emotional learning, because it can't be just done by us. Because it's going to be those outside resources to also, like Lisa's a conduit right now to connect those families to outside resources, but it's a friendlier face because it's us, and it's not a county person coming in and saying, we'll make the soft handoff to somebody to say, come join us. And then the last piece I want to put in there for all of you is the fact of the work that you've done with the approval of other positions. It does fall in line with social emotional learning, is when we have this pre-K grant money, and we've added all these programs into pre-K. It's that early intervention that we all have recognized, because if we can get to them then, we're going to be ready in kindergarten now, more so than if they started us on the first day. I'll share with you one thing. We have a kindergarten starting tomorrow. They're older than their kindergarten age because they've been retained at their last district. Has not been in school 1 day yet. That's something to think about, that we have a kindergartner at 6 years, 8 months walking into our building and has never been in the building yet. And we now have to figure out how we're going to do it. But today we had a wraparound with all the people you're talking about, or we're talking about, to figure out how emotionally we're going to support that student to be successful, because has not had access by walking into a school building yet. So just powerful in the sense of this work is ongoing, and then wrapping back around Keith and everybody else to the community outside to say, we need you back in and look at what we just decided, and where do you fit in to support the needs of our students based on the work that's going to happen.
So the thing, I think the thing that I may be most appreciative of is it's not a focus, the whole system isn't focused on where the problems or where we're already, the focus is, it's preventative, right? We're creating a culture. So as you talk about those outside entities, you know, if we have our rec level coaches or Boy Scouts knowing a common language that children are hearing in school, and they're hearing that outside of that. I mean, that I think is what most inspires me, is it's not about this kindergartner, like this is a tragic kind of circumstance, but it's about, we already have established a community.
That's going to help.
Right? Right?
Yep, absolutely.
And I would say, going to that, the school really is, you know, people talk about schools as hubs, and we're becoming a hub in this, because some of the connections that we're starting to make as part of this work, you know, to align, you know, OCM BOCES is doing some of the same work, the county's doing some of the same work, each of the 5 school districts within our counties are doing some of the same work, but nobody's connected. And so one of the things that we've really been trying to do is incorporate how do we align everybody to try to work as a system, not just in isolation for how we can best meet our community needs as well.
And I think as board members, we've heard that pretty consistently from our faculty. We feel really better tooled at identifying, right? So now we know, we can see and we can sense, but what we're lacking is, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's the other thing that will just be, and as we can expand those tools, we just have an opportunity to really benefit the entire community. You know,
Yeah.
Parents, what do I say? How do I? And it's a common language, or here's where you can access that kind of support, and you know, just this sense that it's not forever, right? It's not forever.
And the piece that I think that was an aha too as well is that there are great practices happening, but intentionally now how do we make everybody have those great practices?
Yes.
Right, because each teacher has a great way to interact with the student, but you know, again, down to what they call pizza breathing, telling your kid how to gain control. But does everybody understand that and why we use that as a process, and that we find that successful, and then how do we give that to everybody? And you all have your own tools on how to work with a student, but we never made the connection that that's actually part of social emotional learning, because you're building capacity, building resiliency, building grit.
Nice.
But then sharing those practices so we actually have, it's purposeful. And it's intended, and it is purposeful in each individual classroom, but unfortunately in education a lot of times it happens in silos. So we want it to be the silo to be the whole district.
And then the last piece of that is, how do you replicate that? How do you
That's right.
how do you introduce new members to our organization, to that structure, so they understand it, they feel equipped to enter into that, and not feel like they've been, you know, just kind of dropped off at the doorstep. So that's a part of all this stuff, is how do we make sure that we can continue this process
How do we
moving
make it
forward?
sustainable as well?
Yeah.
How do we build something and not just try to quickly throw a Band-Aid into it? How do we really build supportive systems?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you had mentioned working with some other, you know, the student body and whatnot, and having attended the student engagement meeting the other day, we are so lucky to have some very intelligent and brave students sit on that committee. And it is clear that this is a very big part of that process as well. So are you working with that particular group as?
So this is one initiative currently that stepped out, we're working with Kara. Well, the thing is that Speak Up Cortland is looking to get student voices, because that's suicide prevention, suicide education, and the idea is grabbing students, but we said, we want to take that bigger. It's not just suicide, it's mental health. So we're working with John O'Callahan and Jen Capps to bring students together, that they have a voice and a forum to discuss those things that are happening to students, and what we may be doing to students unknowingly, and then give them their voice. So I think that's going to help us grow that way too as well. But it was purposeful, because I'll be honest with you, Jen and I pushed it, because we sat at a table and we go speak as district representatives, and there's students there, but it's very awkward because it's almost like they're forced to be there. And we want student participation because they want to be part of it. And the other part is, can we be their voice? Can you share your story? Doesn't mean you have to go tell it.
Correct.
Tell us what we need to tell the county and everybody else to help you with, when they look to make a PSA, as simple as that may sound, are we getting the kid's voice, and then are we posting it on the right media? So that way we have access to them. So that's happening behind the scenes right now, on a small scale, but I can only see that growing, and Tom's aware of that work too.
I think that'd be fantastic, 'cause it gave me goosebumps to to hear what they were saying.
Yeah, they were powerful.
Yes, and I'm so happy to hear that that's going to be an integral part of your plan.
Yeah, well, how we find that way, some students are going to feel comfortable in those focus groups,
Sure.
others aren't. So we have, identified different ways how some of our school counselors then can have individual conversations and bring that information back to us, because it's important. Some of our students who may need it the most are not going to be the ones who want to go out and share that publicly. So we do that, and the last thing I would also say, all three of our task forces, once a month, at the beginning of the month, get together and talk about where we are in each of our work, so that if there is overlap with something that's happening within the community or within student engagement and what we're doing, we can say, how do we work some of these things together? One example of that is when we started with that, we need to identify that SEL curriculum plan, how we were going to identify that. We crossed over into ILC and student engagement to try to talk about how do we involve those people in that planning.
Thank you.
Any last questions for these two gentlemen? Thank you, fellas. Appreciate it. Nice job. So with that, why don't we go into what we were hoping was going to be a very informative budget presentation, but I don't know if you have been following any of the news out of Albany, but our legislators are still legislating and have not yet come to any agreement on the state budget. But we did want to move the process and the information along, and so Mike has put together a presentation to kind of give you a sneak peek at some of the format that you'll be seeing here. And again, as I mentioned at the last meeting, our goal, we have to approve our budget levy by the 22nd of April, but our next meeting's on the 18th. So what we would like to do is get that budget information that we need, schedule a budget and finance meeting so that we could get information out to you ahead of the meeting on the 18th, so we could ask for your approval of that on the 18th. So that's kind of the game plan. As it stands right now, the ever-changing game plan.
I'd like to give a very informative and maybe not entertaining presentation on the budget. So the information that we do have, what I wanted to go through and just give you a look at what the propositions will be. So when we meet next time on the 18th, hopefully we have all the information from the state. The first proposition is what we will actually spend budget-wise, and then again, we promise to reach that amount through revenue. So right now, we've had discussions of keeping that amount at the same amount from 21-22. So we would fill in the blanks here. What we're looking for now from the state to see, are there any state aid increases? We are putting together from pre-K, now having the ability to bill back to the counties, what that would look like as far as revenues, and really where we're going to come up with our max amount of spending. So you will see hopefully on the 18th, that number filled in, and it should be the same amount as last year's budget at $44 million. The next piece, again, we're going to continue leasing 7 school buses. I just filled out paperwork for the leasing of 7 school buses in 2023. By guaranteeing that we're going to stay with the lease program, I was able to lock in pricing at this year's prices prior to the increase. So again, working very well with Matthews Buses. This is saying in Proposition 2 that we are going to be looking to lease buses and stay with the leasing program. The signing of the paperwork today does not, if something were to change, we are able to back out of that. The next piece, library funding. So as part of state law, we have to open up our budget process and tax collection process to our local library. So the Phillips Free Library then determines whether or not they're going to stay at a current amount. The current amount here is $196,165, or if they're going to increase. So this year, they will be going out at an increase, going out at $203,923. This will not be part of the resolution, the part in the yellow. However, we do put it out to our taxpayers that this is a courtesy that we provide. And again, we don't participate in the creation of the budget, and if they have any questions, they can contact the library. The next part, Proposition 4. So this is probably one of the first times in a long time we've had 4 propositions put out there. This is the creation of a new capital reserve fund, the capital reserve fund of 2023. Again, this says that we are going to create essentially a savings account for future capital projects. It won't exceed $10 million plus any accrued interest that's in the account. And the only way that you can transfer that or put money into it is through unassigned fund balance at the end of every year. Money from other reserves, so we could choose to transfer from one reserve into the capital reserve. And again, the only way you can do that is to have voters approve the release, and this lasts for 10 years. So this 2023 capital reserve will last to 2033. So I put together just a little bit more information on this. Again, it's a savings account. It provides for our local share. So when we go into a capital project, we have a local share that we have to pay. It's offset by state aid. State aid on average pays about 83% of the project, or 83 cents on every dollar. We have a local share of 17%, or 17 cents on every dollar. We can use the capital reserve to offset that amount. Again, the reserve can be funded over 10 years. And again, the district will make a determination every June when we take a look at our 4% fund balance. Again, another account that we are allowed to keep by law. If we have monies that exceed that 4%, the Board of Education then votes that we can put that into that reserve. We can also put it into other reserves like TRS as well. We can use anticipated savings from all the CARES, the federal grant monies, the $6.2 million, could also go into this reserve. What we don't do is we don't raise the tax levy with the intention of putting that money into a reserve. That is never the intention in putting the monies in. So that's a big point here. The authorization does not give the district the authority to spend it. Because it's in there, you're authorizing this savings account. Spending has to come, the authorization to move that money has to come from the voters. You would go out in a separate proposition, as we did in the last capital project that was stated in there, that we are going to spend the remaining $134,000 out of the old capital reserve. Voters have to vote on that. Again, voter approval for the expenditures. And again, the reserve can fund the local share rather than add spending. One of the nice things that we've had in past projects is that we were told by the comptroller to move $2 million out of one of our reserves, our workers' comp reserve. We then, in the prior project to this one that we're currently in, we were able to use that money to offset local share, which was a 0 share. Any questions on this piece?
We should communicate those points in the budget flyers, of course.
Yep.
You know, this proposition establishes the account and doesn't
Correct.
set aside an extra $10 million.
That's why I wanted to make sure that we
To fund
put
the
it on
account.
today.
Yep.
So this is the information we will put out to
Yep.
taxpayers. So again, Board of Education candidates, Mr. Bowens, Mr. Fagerheim, and Ms. Riley are the names of the last incumbents. And folks have until April 18th to fill out petitions and submit them to Kelly Appel. Any questions?
Does it make sense on talking to folks about the capital reserve to have some reminders of how that's been done in the past?
Sure.
Because folks may remember setting a capital reserve for turf replacement.
What I can do is make sure that we have that. I can put a sample of that on the 18th, and then we can decide if we want to go out to the public.
I don't know if it makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense.
To give somebody a concrete example makes sense, absolutely. No.
You know, I think that there's an example of us doing it exactly as.
Yep, and how it
the time
benefited us
is
doing it,
right?
yep.
And believe it or not, today, Sonia, when I was fishing out this information, because I said I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, I know other districts have done it, people do have that example out there.
Is there any buzz from the legislature on the 4% versus 8% fund balance?
Right now, the hangup is bail reform and the new Bill Stadium. So they're very silent on any other. I went today and tried to do some research and talk to some colleagues, and mum's the word, nothing's coming out of Albany. The good part of what they had said was that the legislators are fully behind what they want to do for education, which is great, but some of those other pieces and outlier pieces, they haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, there seems to be some rumbling that the $100,000 capital outlay projects, there was a proposal still being discussed to raise it to $250,000,
Right.
which would benefit us as well. But there's been a little more chatter about that than the 4 to 8%, but not really that much of that either.
Okay.
Remember, the big push from the state in years past has been spend down your reserves.
Oh, yeah.
So that's been, so I don't know how much they want to allow people to beef them back up again.
Hopefully they go to $2 billion for the Bill Stadium and not this measly $1 billion.
They're gonna buy new shovels to clean out the turf.
Okay. I believe we're all set now to move to new business. Thank you for that presentation, Michael. If I could please have a motion to accept the reports from the Committee on Preschool Special Education. So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? If I could please have a motion to accept the reports from the Committee on Special Education.
So moved.
Second. Questions or comments for Mr. Moore? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? A motion to approve the disposal of items.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? A motion to approve the FFA field trip request.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? This is the portion of our meeting for community voices. There are none listed. Are there any community voices wishing to be heard? If I could please have a motion to approve personnel.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments regarding personnel?
Looks like modified spring sports have
Great numbers.
good numbers, great numbers.
Great numbers, trying to keep every child involved that we can. Yeah.
Excellent.
Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Informational items, Superintendent?
Yes, I have one informational item for you. The Central New York School Boards has what they call a Board Member of Achievement award. We have had Homer board members in the past be nominated and have won that. Your board president is actually one of those people. We included that information in your board packet for you to take a look at. And what I would ask is if you would like to nominate any of your fellow board members, please let us know and we'll make sure that happens. They reached out with extra fervor this year. COVID has put a clamp down on some of those things in the past, and they want to reinvigorate that. So I would encourage you, if you have someone on the board that you think fits that criteria, I'll help you get through the process of nominating them. That's what I have.
Thank you, Superintendent. I believe we do have district committee reports.
We do. We had a safety committee meeting a while back, and Michael was going to give an update.
Sure. At the last safety committee meeting, we had a review of our current PPE and safety measures to date for COVID-19 and our protocols going forward. We do continue to spray in all of the classrooms, and again, make PPE available to folks who want it. So we had discussed that and the process of that moving forward. We talked about current capital projects, both the EPC and our $22 million project that will be taking place, and the safety measures that will have to go in place for that. And when talking about moving forward what we need to do in that vein. It also talked about where we're at with the intermediate school library. Currently, we're just waiting on NYSER to make a determination. They're our insurance company on whether or not some of the work that had been done in the remediation in the intermediate school library is aidable and through the process of insurance. And then we're actually moving forward on that with our architects as well. We talked about spring safety drills and the use of Navigate Prepared in all the buildings. Again, talking about our bus drills and our general safety drills, fire drills, and emergency drills, things of that nature. Chief Pittman from the Homer Police Department talked about a multidisciplinary threat assessment team. Also talked about the work, I believe it was over last weekend. They were in our buildings working on different protocols for safety. We talked about our safety newsletter that we put out in the district. We put out a safety newsletter to staff and talked about actually enriching that newsletter through NYSER, through our insurance company, and work with Bailey Place and some other pieces in order to get that out there. And then once we felt that it was where it needed to be, we'd share that on Parent Square with families as well. And then we did a roundtable and planned for our next meeting.
I like the safety newsletter because it tends to hit on different topic areas to get staff thinking about things that they should be looking at and being mindful of.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I think that's a neat feature that the district has. As it relates to COVID, I'm presuming the district continues to receive shipments of at-home tests.
Mhm.
Yes.
How do families know that they could access that through the district if they want? And I remember you could drive up and grab some kits, but
Yeah.
I think
We had sent out to Parent Square letting folks know that we were housing them in the nurse's office, and they just needed to contact the school to come and get them.
maybe it makes sense to, I don't know the time frame of when that was last done, but.
Yeah, it was probably 2-3 weeks ago at
Okay.
this point in time.
Then you're good.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't read that, parents.
Well, I will say, one of the things, this is a side note, but to your point, one of the things that we have talked about as a community engagement committee and as an administrative team is now that we feel like we do a decent job with Parent Square and our communicating, we want to dig deeper this summer at our retreat into the data. The diagnostics with Parent Square are incredible, and you can drill right down to who opened it and who didn't open it. And I just looked for my own amusement at the number of people that used to open my COVID communications a year ago compared to how many do now. And a fraction of people are opening anything for me now. So I know if I really want, and I'm not going to take it personally, although maybe a little bit. But so what that tells us is we have to continually keep things fresh and change things up. But, so you're not alone, I guess, is my long way of getting around to saying you're not alone in not reading what we send out.
I just think that's Chris's job. Like, he has to read it.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you, Mike. Student engagement?
Well, we gave the update. I didn't, student engagement met and community engagement had met, but we kind of went over what it was we talked about there.
Okay, I'm going to move on to board member activities.
Good to take you to Cabaret Saturday night. Wonderful job done by our students through all the grade levels, and it was great to have a gym full of people in a very safe way. The team set it up to have chairs so folks could grab and set up distance how they'd like to, and just a great event. The kids did great. Everybody pitched in and made it happen.
I was there as well. That was really nice to see the full gym full.
Who MCs? I was out of town, I missed it.
That was our MC right
Did
there.
you? Oh, excellent, excellent.
It sounded good.
Yeah.
Good to be visited.
I hadn't done it in a while.
Yeah,
It was fun.
Yeah.
And Zach Pollock, who's doing our sound, just outstanding.
Zach Sovacool. Yeah.
Sovacool, excuse me.
Yeah.
He just outstanding.
Yeah.
He the sound quality, you could hear the kids, everything about it, and his whole spirit about it. I worked with our previous person doing that, and Zach he's just so helpful. He's excited to be doing it.
He's outstanding. Staff love working with him.
Just fantastic job.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I went to, in addition to that, went to the Kaleidoscope,
Yep.
the concert, the all-district concert before which was very good last week. And then the spring sports are off and running, that's why I'm late, I apologize, so, but then a couple of cross games.
Okay, upcoming events, Superintendent?
Yes, we actually are putting on the All-County High School Vocal and Instrumental Jazz Concert this Thursday, 7 o'clock here. So some of the finest musicians from the entire county will be here in the auditorium. So hopefully you're able to attend that. And if you haven't had a bingo opportunity in some time, you will want to make sure that we get to the elementary school. The elementary PTO is putting on a bingo night on the 20th. And so,
Try to go with a family.
who's the caller? Are you the caller, Mr. Pasquarella?
We're in contract disputes between Karen, Keith, and I. I see who's the best offer and takes. No, Karen did last year, I did 1 year in just Lori's absence that 1 year, but right now Karen and I are in negotiations.
Okay, all right. So keep me up to date there. So that will depend on whether I go or not. All right, okay.
Remember, I would like you to attend with a family though, so you have to attend with a pre-KK on one night or a first, second on the other night.
Right.
We also want to know our numbers, Mr. Turk. We want to keep spacing too.
That's correct. Yeah, so, and if you, again, look down the list, a lot of great opportunities going on, and hope you're able to do a whole host of those. That's what I have.
Will we maybe ask, yeah, when do we meet again?
The 18th.
Okay, so maybe our meeting in May, just to get some feedback on how state assessments went?
Sure.
More curious about what the student response was to state assessments and.
We'd be happy to give that
Okay.
update. Yeah.
Because math is end of the month, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if I could please have a
So
motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
I wasn't gonna let.
It's always good for a chuck. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Can't do it to just Shanice, not Kate.
I would. How many times can I sign?
I think only one. I think that's good news. I've had several people ask that question, like, can I sign like 20 times? It's like, you didn't, I only come
They were going to.
I had somebody say, you really want to do this? It's work, it's effort, but it's not like it's been work.
Good work.
Oh, yeah, that's.
I didn't have all instructions.
I'm gonna sign it too.
Yeah, that stuff and the whole gap reduction nonsense.
Yeah, I didn't. I meet you